Waitress shelters 20, freezing bikers. Next morning, 1,000 Hell's Angels stop outside her diner. But what they did next left the entire town speechless, and her. Subscribe now, or this might be our last meeting. Follow, comment, and share to stay connected. Don't miss out. Let's dive in. The wind screamed against the windows of Route 9 diner like something alive and furious. Gabriela Navarro wiped down the last table, her movements automatic after 3 years of the same routine. Through the frost-covered glass, abandoned cars dotted Highway 50 like forgotten toys, already half buried under white drifts. The lights flickered. Once, twice. Then darkness swallowed everything. "Perfect," she muttered, fumbling for the flashlight she kept under the register. The battery was weak, of course it was, but it gave enough light to see the propane stove in the kitchen. At least she could keep warm. At least she wasn't stuck in one of those cars outside. The radio crackled with the same emergency broadcast it had been repeating for 2 hours. All routes closed. Seek immediate shelter. This is a life-threatening storm. Gabriela pulled her worn cardigan tighter. The diner's heating had died with the power, and the temperature was already dropping. She should have left hours ago, but Mrs. Chen had needed her Wednesday shift covered, and Gabriela needed every dollar she could get. Law school debt didn't care about Nevada blizzards. Former law school debt, she corrected herself bitterly. The pounding on the door made her jump. Through the frosted glass, she could make out shapes. Large, dark, moving. Her heart hammered as she approached slowly, flashlight raised like a weapon. 20 men stood outside, their leather jackets crusted with ice, faces red and desperate with cold. The one in front, massive, with a gray beard frozen into icicles, raised his hands in surrender. "Please," he shouted over the wind. "We're freezing out here. Our bikes died 2 miles back. We just need to get warm." Gabriela's hand trembled on the door handle. She'd seen the news. She knew what people thought about motorcycle clubs. Hell's Angels patches adorned their jackets, skulls grinning in the beam of her flashlight. But she also saw the way they were shaking, the blue tint to their lips, the desperation that looked too much like her own on countless cold nights. She unlocked the door. They stumbled in like ghosts, bringing snow and cold and the smell of leather and gasoline. Gabriela immediately regretted her decision as they filled her small diner, making the space feel impossibly small. "Thank you," the bearded man said, his voice rough. "I'm Bear Thompson. We won't cause any trouble, I swear it." Gabriela nodded mutely, already moving toward the kitchen. "I'll make coffee. There are blankets in the storage room. Help yourselves." She worked quickly, mechanically, filling the largest pots she had with water for the propane stove. Behind her she could hear the men organizing themselves, speaking in low voices, the rustling of emergency blankets. "Here." She turned to find Bear holding out a $50 bill. "For the trouble." "The register's down," she said automatically. "Then keep it." His eyes were kind, despite the intimidating skull tattoos creeping up his neck. "You're saving our lives tonight." Gabriela distributed coffee in chipped mugs, watching as frozen hands wrapped around the warmth. These men, these supposed criminals, thanked her quietly, their manners unexpectedly gentle. One of them, younger with worried eyes, pulled out his phone. "No signal," he said. "My wife's going to be terrified." "Mine too," another added. "Kids were expecting me home tonight. Wives, children." Somehow Gabriela hadn't imagined that. She'd seen the patches, the tattoos, the hard faces, and assumed she knew their story. Just like everyone had assumed they knew hers when Derek Harlow had destroyed her future with lies. "The storm should break by morning," she offered quietly. "You can call then." Bear caught her eye across the room and nodded, a gesture of understanding that went beyond gratitude. He saw what she was doing. He saw that she was afraid but choosing kindness anyway. Outside, the blizzard buried the world in white and screaming wind. Inside, warmth slowly returned to frozen limbs. Gabriela locked the door and pulled the curtains closed, creating a small pocket of survival against the storm. 20 motorcycles lay abandoned somewhere on the highway. 20 men huddled in her diner, trusting a stranger who'd chosen to trust them back. None of them knew that by morning their quiet act of mutual survival would explode into a national scandal. None of them knew that 1,000 more motorcycles would arrive with the dawn. And none of them knew that the powerful men who'd tried to bury Gabriela Navarro were about to discover she was still very much alive. The sound woke her. Gabriella lifted her head from the counter where she dozed off around 4 a.m., her neck stiff and aching. For a moment she couldn't place the noise, a deep rolling thunder that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Engines. She stumbled to the window and pulled back the curtain. Her breath caught. The parking lot, the highway, the entire visible world was filled with motorcycles. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. They stretched in perfect formation as far as she could see, chrome gleaming in the weak dawn light, engines rumbling like a collective heartbeat. What the hell? Bear appeared beside her, his eyes wide. The door burst open. Men and women in leather flooded in, not threatening, but overwhelming. Patches from clubs she'd never heard of. Devil's Disciples, Iron Brotherhood, Widowmakers, Desert Phantoms. They clapped Bear on the back, embraced his men, their voices overlapping. Heard you boys needed backup. Came from Phoenix soon as we got word. Nobody leaves brothers stranded. Gabriella pressed herself against the wall, trying to process. This wasn't a rescue. This was a statement, a show of force and solidarity that had materialized overnight. Then came the news vans. Channel 8, Channel 3, CNN. They appeared like vultures, cameras already rolling, reporters shouting questions through the windows. Gabriella's stomach dropped as she caught fragments of their broadcasts. Motorcycle gang took over local diner. Waitress held hostage. Armed standoff. No, she whispered. No, no, no. Police sirens wailed. Sheriff's cars blocked both ends of the highway, officers emerging with hands on weapons. A megaphone crackled. This is Sheriff Morrison. We need everyone to exit the building slowly with hands visible. Bear turned to her, his face stricken. We never meant... I know. Gabriella's voice sounded distant to her own ears. Through the window, she could see reporters positioning themselves for the best angles. Her face would be on every screen in America by noon, the face she'd worked so hard to hide. An officer pushed through the door, hand on his holster. Ma'am, are you all right? Have these men threatened you? They were freezing, Gabriella said, but her voice was too quiet, lost in the chaos. Ma'am, I need you to come with me. We'll take your statement. She saved our lives. Bear stepped forward, and immediately 3 officers drew weapons. Hands where we can see them. Everything happened too fast. Gabriella tried to explain, but her words disappeared into the noise. More police, more cameras, more reporters shouting about dangerous gangs and criminal activity. Someone grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the door. She caught a glimpse of her reflection in the diner's mirror as they led her out. Her hair was a mess, her uniform wrinkled, her eyes wide with fear. She looked exactly like what they wanted her to be. A victim, a story. The cameras loved it. Miss, can you tell us what happened? Were you held against your will? Are you associated with the Hells Angels? Sheriff Morrison's voice cut through. Everyone needs to clear this area immediately. This diner is now a crime scene pending investigation. Crime scene. The words hit Gabriella like ice water. She'd given freezing men shelter from a deadly storm, and somehow, she was the criminal. Bear pushed through the officers toward her. This is wrong. She helped us. She... 2 deputies grabbed him, forcing him to his knees. Don't resist. One barked. The last thing Gabriella saw before they put her in the sheriff's car was the long line of motorcycles, their riders standing at attention like soldiers, and in the distance, between the news vans and police cars, a black Mercedes pulled up. A man emerged, tall, expensive suit, the kind of confidence that came with serious money. He surveyed the scene with cold calculation, his phone already at his ear. Even from this distance, Gabriella could see his expression, disgust. She didn't know yet that his name was Gabriel Lawson. She didn't know he owned the gas stations that kept this highway alive. She didn't know that within an hour he would publicly demand her arrest. All she knew was that her carefully hidden life had just been dragged into the light, and the past she'd been running from, the people who'd destroyed her once before, would be watching the news. They would know exactly where to find her. Gabriel Lawson had built his empire on calculated risks and quick decisions. Standing in front of Route 9 diner with cameras trained on him, he made both. This woman, he gestured toward where Gabriella sat in the sheriff's car, endangered this entire county. She harbored known criminals during a state of emergency, putting law-abiding citizens at risk. His voice carried the kind of authority that came from owning half the commercial real estate in Nevada. The reporters ate it up. Microphones thrust forward like weapons. Gabriella watched through the car window, her hands trembling in her lap. She'd been interrogated for 2 hours, released without charges, because there were no charges to file, and now this man was trying her in the court of public opinion instead. "Mr. Lawson," a reporter called out. "The Hells Angels claim she saved their lives." "The Hells Angels," Gabriel cut in smoothly, "have members with outstanding warrants in 3 states. This woman's poor judgment created a dangerous situation that required a multi-agency response. My gas stations supply this community. I employ people here, and I won't stand by while reckless decisions threaten their safety." Each word was a nail in her coffin. Gabriella felt her chest tighten. This was Derek all over again, a powerful man with a microphone, rewriting reality to suit his narrative. She opened the car door. "That's not what happened." Her voice was quiet, but something about it cut through the noise. Cameras swiveled toward her. Gabriel turned, seeing her clearly for the first time. Young, mid-20s probably, exhausted with dark circles under her eyes and a coffee-stained uniform that had seen better days. But her gaze was steady, unflinching, even as she faced down cameras and accusations. "I gave shelter to 20 human beings who were freezing to death," Gabriella said, each word deliberate. "That's not reckless. That's called being a decent person." "You aided criminals," Gabriel started. "I aided people." She stepped closer, and Gabriel was struck by the quiet steel in her voice. They had wives calling, children waiting, and yes, they wore patches that scared me, but they were dying out there, and I chose their lives over my fear. If that's criminal, then charge me. The crowd had gone quiet. Gabriel studied her face, looking for the con, the angle. In his experience, everyone wanted something. But this woman, this waitress in a dying diner, looked at him like he was the problem. It infuriated him. "Your noble intentions don't change the facts," he said coldly. "This diner is a liability. I'm recommending the county revoke its operating license pending a full investigation." Something flickered in her eyes. Not fear, recognition, like she'd heard this speech before from different lips. A Blacktown car pulled up, and Gabriel's mother emerged with the careful grace of old money and older wisdom. Ruth Lawson had been navigating Nevada society for 60 years, and she read situations the way her son read balance sheets. "Gabriel," she said quietly, touching his arm, "perhaps we should hear the full story before making declarations." "Mother, this isn't—" "The full story," Ruth repeated, her tone gentle but immovable. She turned to Gabriella. "What's your name, dear?" "Gabriella Navarro." Ruth's eyes narrowed slightly, the way they did when she was filing information away. "And you work here alone?" "Most nights. During a historic blizzard, 20 men asked for shelter, and you gave it. Then 1,000 more arrived at dawn. That must have been terrifying." Gabriella's shoulders sagged slightly, the first crack in her armor. "I didn't know they were coming. Bear, the man they arrested, he just wanted to keep his people alive. They were respectful, grateful even." "Of course they were grateful," another voice cut in, smooth as silk and twice as dangerous. "You gave them exactly what they needed." Derek Harlow emerged from the crowd like he'd been waiting for his cue. Gabriel's business partner, the man who'd helped him expand from 3 gas stations to 30 in 5 years. Derek's smile was calculated, his expensive suit immaculate despite the mud and melting snow. Gabriella went pale. The blood drained from her face so quickly that Ruth actually stepped forward, concerned. But Gabriella didn't faint. She stood frozen, staring at Derek like he was a ghost. "Do you two know each other?" Gabriel asked, glancing between them. "No," Derek said smoothly. "Yes," Gabriella whispered at the same time. Derek's smile never wavered. "I think you're confused, Miss Navarro. Perhaps the stress of the situation. You know exactly who I am." Her voice was barely audible, but it carried weight. Years of weight. "You know what you did." Gabriel watched Derek's expression, perfectly maintained concern with just a hint of pity. The kind of look you gave someone who was clearly unstable. It was masterful performance, but Ruth was watching Gabriella, and her face had gone thoughtful. "Gabriel," Derek said, turning away from Gabriella like she'd ceased to matter. "I've arranged for a full forensic audit of the diner. We should have results by this afternoon. I'm sure we'll find—" "An audit?" Gabriella found her voice. "You're going to plant evidence, just like before." "Before?" Gabriel's interest sharpened. Derek laughed, warm, genuine, the laugh of a man being falsely accused. "I've never met this woman before today, though I understand stress can cause paranoid delusions." "Stanford Law 2022, Gabriella said, her voice stronger now. You were guest lecturing on corporate ethics. I was the student who found the discrepancies in your Thornton case. You had me expelled before I could report them. The silence that followed was electric. Gabriel looked at his partner, his friend, the man who'd helped build everything, and saw nothing but bemused concern. Then he looked at Gabriella and saw something else entirely. Absolute certainty. One of them was lying. And Gabriel had spent 15 years learning to read people. His fortune depended on it. He just wasn't sure which one he believed. The forensic team arrived at 2 p.m., led by Derek's independent contractor, a thin man with nervous hands named Peterson, who'd done work for Lawson Enterprises before. Gabriella watched from across the parking lot, still technically free but surrounded by enough police presence to make escape impossible. Bear and his men had been processed and released. No warrants, no charges, just a lot of wasted taxpayer money. But they lingered nearby, engines quiet, waiting. "This is wrong," Bear said, standing beside her. "That suit, Derek. He's dirty. I can smell it." "I know." Gabriella's voice was hollow. "I've seen him work before. He's good at this." She'd spent 3 years rebuilding herself after Stanford. 3 years of hiding, of working jobs that didn't require background checks, of staying invisible. And now Derek Harlow stood 50 feet away, destroying her all over again with the same calculated precision. Gabriel watched from beside his Mercedes, phone in hand, trying to focus on the market reports his assistant was sending. But his eyes kept drifting to the woman, Gabriella, who stood with the bikers like she belonged there. His mother appeared at his elbow. "You're thinking." "I'm always thinking." "You're thinking about whether she's telling the truth." Ruth studied her son's face. "About Derek." Gabriel's jaw tightened. "Derek's been my partner for 5 years. He's helped me build everything." "That's not an answer." Before Gabriel could respond, Peterson emerged from the diner, carrying evidence bags. Derek was immediately at his side, and even from this distance, Gabriel could see the conversation was choreographed. "Sheriff Morrison," Derek called out, his voice carrying across the lot. "I think you need to see this." The sheriff took the bags, his expression darkening as he examined the contents. Gabriel moved closer, his instincts humming. "Oxycodone," the sheriff said grimly. "Enough to be considered distribution. And these documents," he held up papers that looked official, stamped, important. "Financial records showing payments from known criminal organizations." "No," Gabriella's voice cracked. "That's not possible. I've never—" "Miss Navarro," Sheriff Morrison said, and his tone had shifted from concern to professional. "I'm going to need you to come with me. You're under arrest for possession with intent to distribute and conspiracy to commit fraud." The world tilted. Gabriella felt hands on her arms, cold metal clicking around her wrists. This couldn't be happening. Not again. Not the same way. "Those aren't mine." She tried to pull away, but the deputies held firm. "He planted them, just like he planted the emails at Stanford. Just like—" "Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent." Bear lunged forward. "She's innocent. We were here all night. There were no drugs." 2 deputies tackled him, forcing him to the pavement. Another biker moved to help, and suddenly chaos erupted, officers shouting, bikers pushing forward, cameras capturing everything. Gabriel stood frozen, watching it unfold. Derek was beside him now, speaking in low, urgent tones. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. She's connected to criminal enterprises, Gabriel. She used the storm as cover to—" "How did you know where to look?" Gabriel heard himself ask. Derek blinked. "What?" "The drugs, the documents. How did Peterson know exactly where to find them in a diner with 100 possible hiding places?" "Anonymous tip." "From whom?" Gabriel turned to face his partner fully. "We've been here since 9 a.m. When did this tip come in? Before or after Gabriella mentioned Stanford?" Derek's expression flickered, just for a second, but Gabriel caught it. The mask slipped, revealing calculation underneath. "You're defending her?" Derek's voice hardened almost imperceptibly. "A waitress you met 3 hours ago over your business partner?" "I'm asking questions." "Gabriel," Ruth said quietly, appearing between them. "I visited the diner while they were processing the scene. I found something interesting." She held up a folder, old, worn, marked with coffee stains. "It was in Gabriella's locker. I thought you should see it." Gabriel took the folder. Inside were documents, copies, but clear enough. Case files, emails, financial records. And at the center of it all, one name appeared repeatedly. Derek Harlow. "Where did you get that?" Derek's voice was still smooth, but something beneath it had gone sharp. That's private. It's evidence, Ruth said calmly. Evidence that Miss Navarro has apparently been compiling for 3 years. Evidence of fraud, money laundering, and witness tampering in the Thornton case. The case that made Lawson Enterprises very, very wealthy. Gabriel's hands tightened on the folder. He remembered the Thornton case, a complex corporate acquisition that Derek had handled brilliantly. The deal that had launched them from regional players to major competitors. The deal that had been too good to be true. Gabriel, Derek said carefully, your mother is clearly upset. Let's discuss this privately. Were you guest lecturing at Stanford in 2022? The question hung in the air. Derek smiled, that same warm, genuine smile. I've given dozens of lectures. I can't remember every student who... Yes or no? The smile faded. This is ridiculous. You're going to believe some desperate waitress over me, over everything we've built? Gabriel looked across the parking lot to where Gabriella sat in the back of a patrol car, her head held high despite the handcuffs. Then he looked at Derek, his friend, his partner, and saw a stranger. Get out, Gabriel said quietly. What? Get out of my company. Get out of my sight. Get out before I call my lawyers and tear apart every deal you've ever touched. Derek's face transformed. The mask was gone completely now, replaced by cold fury. You have no idea what you're doing. That folder? It means nothing without the originals, and she'll never find them. I made sure of that 3 years ago. He turned and walked to his car, leaving Gabriel standing with his mother and a folder full of copies that proved nothing, but suggested everything. Sheriff Morrison approached, his expression uncomfortable. Mr. Lawson, I'm sorry, but we have to process Miss Navarro. The evidence is circumstantial at best, Ruth said firmly, and my son will be providing Miss Navarro with the best legal representation in the state. Won't you, Gabriel? Gabriel watched the patrol car pull away, Gabriella's face visible through the window. She wasn't crying. She wasn't pleading. She just looked tired, like someone who'd fought this battle before and lost. But this time, Gabriel thought, she wouldn't be fighting alone. Yes, he said. Yes, I will. Gabriel didn't sleep that night. He sat in his study until 4 a.m., reading every page in Gabriella's folder 3 times over. By dawn, he'd made 17 phone calls, lawyers, investigators, former colleagues from Stanford. The picture that emerged made his stomach turn. Ruth found him at his desk, tie loosened, eyes red from screen glare and exhaustion. She set down coffee without comment. Tell me, she said simply. Gabriella Navarro was a third-year law student at Stanford in 2022. Top 5% of her class. Gabriel pushed a printed email across the desk. She found irregularities in Thornton Industries acquisition documents while researching corporate ethics. Documents Derek had filed. Ruth read the email, her expression darkening. She tried to report it to her professor, the ethics board, the California Bar Association. Gabriel pulled up more documents. Within 2 weeks, she was expelled for plagiarism. Her thesis, the one detailing Derek's fraud, was found to contain copied passages. Passages that mysteriously appeared in her server account after she'd submitted the original version. He planted evidence and destroyed the originals. Her faculty advisor retired suddenly with a generous severance package from an anonymous donor. Gabriel's laugh was bitter. Payment processing handled by Thornton Industries, where Derek was VP of Legal Affairs. Ruth was quiet for a long moment. And then he came to you. In 2023, brought the Thornton deal with him. Said he had insider knowledge that would make us both rich. Gabriel stood, pacing to the window. He was right, because he'd orchestrated the fraud that made the acquisition possible. What are you going to do? Gabriel thought of Gabriella sitting in that cell, facing charges for crimes she didn't commit. Again, I'm going to fix it. The county jail visiting room smelled like industrial cleaner and defeat. Gabriella sat across the plexiglass partition, still wearing her diner uniform. She didn't look surprised to see Gabriel. They're setting bail at $50,000, Gabriel said. I've arranged. Why are you here? Her voice was flat. To help. You called me a criminal on national television. Gabriella leaned forward, shadows dark under her eyes. You stood next to the man who destroyed my life and nodded along while he framed me. Again. So forgive me if I don't understand this sudden conscience. Gabriel deserved that. I was wrong. Is that supposed to make this better? No. He met her gaze steadily. But I've spent 12 hours pulling Derek's history. I know what he did at Stanford. Professor Mitchell's retirement. The plagiarism charges. Your thesis that disappeared from university servers. Something shifted in Gabriella's expression. How did you? I have resources. I've hired Carter and Associates, best defense attorneys in Nevada. They're filing motions to suppress the diner evidence. We're also reopening the Stanford investigation. That case was closed 3 years ago. It's being reopened. I have friends on the California bar. Gabriel paused. Derek got comfortable. Comfortable people leave trails. Gabriella studied his face like she was solving a puzzle. Why are you doing this? Because it's right. Bullshit. Her voice cut sharp. You're a businessman. You don't make moves because they're right. You make them because they're profitable. What's your angle? Gabriel almost laughed. Even locked in a cell, she saw through him. Derek Harlow used my company to legitimize fraud. That makes every deal we've closed in 5 years suspect. So yes, I'm protecting my interests, but I'm also trying to help you. How generous. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to let me fix the mess I helped create. He held her gaze. Right now, you're in a cell for crimes you didn't commit, and Derek's probably at the country club. That's not acceptable to me. Since when do you care about what's acceptable? The question hit hard. Gabriel thought about his empire, built on Derek's advice and deals. How many other Gabriellas were out there? Since about 14 hours ago, he admitted quietly, when I watched them handcuff someone who'd done nothing wrong, and realized I helped put them there. Gabriella was quiet. Finally, the original Stanford documents. Derek told me he destroyed them. People say that. They rarely do it. Gabriel pulled out her worn folder. You've been collecting copies for 3 years. Where did you get them? Freedom of information requests, court records, one of Derek's former assistants. Her expression was bitter. But copies don't prove tampering. I needed source files, metadata, digital fingerprints. Those are gone. Maybe not. Derek was VP at Thornton until 2023. Companies maintain email archives for 7 years. Gabriel made a note. If he used company servers? He did. Gabriella leaned forward, hope flickering. All faculty communications went through Thornton's secure system, through their VPN. Then the emails still exist. Gabriel stood. You'll be out by this afternoon. By tomorrow we'll have enough evidence to bury Derek Harlow permanently. And if you can't, Gabriel met her gaze through the plexiglass. 3 years ago, this woman had tried to do the right thing and lost everything. Then I'll spend every dollar I have making sure you get justice anyway, he said. That's a promise. I have resources. I've hired Carter and Associates, best defense attorneys in Nevada. They're filing motions to suppress the diner evidence. We're also reopening the Stanford investigation. That case was closed 3 years ago. It's being reopened. I have friends on the California bar. Gabriel paused. Derek got comfortable. Comfortable people leave trails. Gabriella studied his face like she was solving a puzzle. Why are you doing this? Because it's right. Bullshit. Her voice cut sharp. You're a businessman. You don't make moves because they're right. You make them because they're profitable. What's your angle? Gabriel almost laughed. Even locked in a cell, she saw through him. Derek Harlow used my company to legitimize fraud. That makes every deal we've closed in 5 years suspect. So yes, I'm protecting my interests. But I'm also trying to help you. How generous. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to let me fix the mess I helped create. He held her gaze. Right now you're in a cell for crimes you didn't commit, and Derek's probably at the country club. That's not acceptable to me. Since when do you care about what's acceptable? The question hit hard. Gabriel thought about his empire, built on Derek's advice and deals. How many other Gabriellas were out there? Since about 14 hours ago, he admitted quietly. When I watched them handcuff someone who'd done nothing wrong and realized I helped put them there. Gabriella was quiet. Finally, the original Stanford documents. Derek told me he destroyed them. People say that. They rarely do it. Gabriel pulled out her worn folder. You've been collecting copies for 3 years. Where did you get them? Freedom of information requests, court records, one of Derek's former assistants. Her expression was bitter. But copies don't prove tampering. I needed source files, metadata, digital fingerprints. Those are gone. Maybe not. Derek was VP at Thornton until 2023. Companies maintain email archives for 7 years. Gabriel made a note. If he used company servers? He did. Gabriella leaned forward, hope flickering. All faculty communications went through Thornton's secure system, through their VPN. Then the emails still exist. Gabriel stood. You'll be out by this afternoon. By tomorrow, we'll have enough evidence to bury Derek Harlow permanently. And if you can't? Gabriel met her gaze through the plexiglass. 3 years ago, this woman had tried to do the right thing and lost everything. Then I'll spend every dollar I have making sure you get justice anyway, he said. That's a promise. Bloco 6. Equata Publica. Derek's press conference filled the Reno Grand Hotel ballroom at noon. 200 people showed up. Reporters, bloggers, concerned citizens smelling blood in the water. Gabriel watched the live stream from his office, jaw tight. Derek looked perfect. Concerned but resolute. He'd always been good at playing cameras. I want to address the disturbing revelations about Route 9 Diner, Derek began, voice carrying practiced regret. As someone dedicated to corporate ethics and community safety, I'm heartbroken by what we've discovered. He clicked to the first slide, a photo of Gabriela, clearly taken without her knowledge, looking exhausted outside the diner. Gabriela Navarro has a history of making baseless accusations against successful professionals. In 2022, while at Stanford Law, she attempted to damage my reputation with fabricated claims after receiving poor grades. When investigated and dismissed, she was expelled for academic dishonesty. The lie was delivered so smoothly that Gabriel felt sick. Now she's made similar accusations while facing serious criminal charges. Derek shook his head sadly. It's a pattern of deflection and false victimhood that... Gabriel's phone buzzed. His lead investigator. Got something. Call now. He muted the live stream and dialed. Talk to me. Thornton's IT department kept everything, the investigator said, excitement bleeding through professional calm. Every email Derek sent through their system between 2020 and 2023, including the ones to Stanford's server admin requesting security updates to student accounts, including Miss Navarro's. Gabriel's heart hammered. Can you prove it was him? His digital signature is all over the access logs. He made 17 separate entries into her university account in February 2022, the same week the plagiarism was discovered. Send everything to Carter and Associates immediately, and to the California bar. Already done, but Gabriel, there's more. A pause. Derek's been doing this for years. We found similar patterns at his previous firm. Graduate students, junior associates, anyone who got too close to his deals. At least 6 people over 15 years. 6 people. 6 lives destroyed so Derek could stay comfortable and wealthy. Get me names and contact information for all of them, Gabriel said. And keep digging. He hung up and unmuted the live stream. Derek was taking questions now, his performance flawless. Mr. Harlow, Gabriel Lawson has publicly distanced himself from you. Do you have a response? Derek smiled, warm, slightly sad. Gabriel is a friend. I understand he's under tremendous pressure right now. When the facts become clear, I'm confident our partnership will continue. The arrogance made Gabriel's blood boil. His mother appeared in the doorway. The lawyers are ready. So is Bear Thompson and his entire motorcycle club. They're organizing a protest outside the county jail. Good. Gabriel stood, straightening his tie. Let's go. By 3 p.m., 500 motorcycles lined the streets outside the jail. They weren't threatening. They just stood there, engines silent, a wall of leather and solidarity. News crews covered it like a siege. Gabriel arrived with Carter and 3 associates, walking through the crowd. Bear stepped forward, his massive frame blocking the entrance. She innocent? Bear asked simply. Yes. You gonna prove it? I'm gonna try. Bear studied him for a long moment, then nodded and stepped aside. All right then, we'll wait. Inside, Gabriel found Sheriff Morrison looking harried and overwhelmed. Mr. Lawson, I can't just release her because you... I'm not asking you to release her because of me. Gabriel handed him a tablet. I'm asking you to release her because the evidence used to arrest her was planted by Derek Harlow, and I can prove it. Morrison scrolled through the documents, his expression darkening with each page. These are emails from Derek Harlow to evidence contractor Peterson, dated 2 days before the diner incident. Gabriel continued, discussing payment for securing materials and strategic placement. There are also bank transfers totaling $50,000. This doesn't prove. There's more. Gabriel pulled up another file. Security footage from the diner's outdoor camera. It was damaged in the storm, but our tech team recovered the data. You can see Peterson entering the diner at 6 a.m., 3 hours before the official search began. Morrison watched the grainy footage. A man in a jacket carrying a bag entered the diner, stayed 12 minutes, left without the bag. Jesus Christ, Morrison muttered. Derek Harlow framed her, Gabriel said flatly. Just like he framed her at Stanford 3 years ago. Just like he's framed at least 6 other people over 15 years. And if you don't release her immediately, I'm going to every news outlet covering this story and telling them exactly why. Morrison's jaw worked. Finally, I'll start the paperwork. Gabriella emerged from the county jail at 4:47 p.m. to the sound of 500 motorcycle engines roaring to life in celebration. The noise was deafening, joyful, defiant. She stood blinking in the sunlight, still wearing her stained uniform, and Gabriel watched something shift in her expression. Not quite trust, not quite forgiveness, but maybe the beginning of understanding. Bear swept her into a crushing hug. Told you we'd wait. Gabriel approached slowly, aware of the cameras, aware of the crowd. Miss Navarro, you found the evidence. It wasn't a question. We found enough to clear you. The rest, the Stanford case, Derek's other victims, that's going to take more time. But you'll do it. Yes. She studied his face, and Gabriel felt stripped bare under that gaze. She saw his guilt, his determination, his desperate need to make this right. Okay, she said finally. Okay. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. Behind them, Derek Harlow's press conference was still playing on someone's phone, still lying, still performing, but his time was running out. The Nevada District Court was built to intimidate. High ceilings, dark wood paneling, the kind of architecture that reminded everyone who entered that justice was a serious business. Today, it was packed beyond capacity. Gabriella sat at the defense table between 2 of Carter and Associates' best attorneys, her hands folded calmly in her lap. She'd traded her diner uniform for a simple navy dress that Ruth had insisted on buying. Professional, dignified, nothing like the desperate criminal Derek had painted her to be. Across the aisle, Derek sat with his own legal team, 3 attorneys in suits that cost more than Gabriella made in 6 months. He looked confident, almost bored, like this was a minor inconvenience before lunch. The gallery was split down the middle. On one side, motorcycle club members in their leather vests sat rigid and silent. On the other, business associates and reporters filled every seat. Gabriel sat in the front row behind Gabriella, his mother beside him. Judge Patricia Chen entered, and the bailiff called for order. This is a preliminary hearing to determine whether charges against Miss Gabriella Navarro should proceed to trial. Judge Chen began, her voice carrying authority earned over 30 years on the bench. Mr. Morrison, you may present the state's evidence. The prosecutor stood, a young man named Martinez who looked increasingly uncomfortable with his case. Your Honor, on the morning of January 28th, law enforcement discovered controlled substances and fraudulent documents at Route 9 Diner, where Miss Navarro works as Objection. Carter rose smoothly. The prosecution is aware that the evidence in question was planted by a third party. We have documentation proving, Your Honor, Derek's lead attorney interrupted. The defense is making serious accusations without... I have video evidence, Carter said calmly, clicking a remote. The courtroom monitors lit up with grainy security footage. This shows evidence contractor James Peterson entering Route 9 Diner at 6:17 a.m. on January 28th, 3 hours before the official search warrant was executed. He's carrying a bag. When he exits 12 minutes later, the bag is gone. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Furthermore, Carter continued over the noise, we have bank records showing a payment of $50,000 from an account registered to Derek Harlow to James Peterson, dated January 26th. The payment memo reads, consulting services, rather vague for a forensic contractor. Martinez was shuffling papers frantically. Your Honor, this is the first we're hearing about, because the evidence was provided to law enforcement only yesterday, Judge Chen said dryly. Mr. Martinez, did your office verify the chain of custody on the materials found at the diner? Martinez cleared his throat. We relied on the contractor's report, Your Honor. The contractor who, according to this video, had unsupervised access to the crime scene hours before the official search. Judge Chen's expression could have frozen fire. Continue, Mr. Carter. Thank you, Your Honor. Carter pulled up another document. We'd also like to submit evidence regarding Mr. Harlow's pattern of planting evidence to silence accusers. In 2022, Objection! Derek's attorney was on his feet. My client is not on trial here. He should be, Bear's voice boomed from the gallery. Judge Chen's gavel cracked. Order! Mr. Thompson, one more outburst and you'll be removed. Bear nodded but didn't look remotely apologetic. Carter didn't miss a beat. Your Honor, the pattern is directly relevant. Miss Navarro accused Mr. Harlow of fraud in 2022 while at Stanford Law. Within 2 weeks, she was expelled for plagiarism. Plagiarism that our investigation shows was fabricated through unauthorized access to her university accounts. He displayed another set of documents. These are access logs from Stanford's server, obtained through subpoena. They show 17 separate entries into Miss Navarro's account by an IP address registered to Thornton Industries, where Mr. Harlow was Vice President of Legal Affairs. The entries occurred during the exact time period when the allegedly plagiarized material appeared in her thesis. The whispers became a roar. Derek's expression never changed, but Gabriel saw the tiny muscle jumping in his jaw, recognition of a trap closing. Furthermore, Carter raised his voice over the noise. We've identified 6 other individuals over the past 15 years who accused Mr. Harlow of professional misconduct. All 6 faced sudden career-ending scandals shortly after. All 6 scandals involved evidence that appeared mysteriously and couldn't be explained. Judge Chen leaned forward. Mr. Harlow, do you wish to testify? Derek stood slowly, his smile never wavering. Your Honor, these accusations are not accusations, evidence. Carter clicked to another screen. These are emails from Mr. Harlow to various contractors over a 10-year period. Note the pattern. A request for security consulting, followed by payment, followed by a scandal befalling someone who'd opposed him. The language is coded, but the pattern is unmistakable. Where did you obtain private emails? Derek's attorney demanded. From Thornton Industries archived servers, pursuant to a federal subpoena issued yesterday morning. Carter's smile was razor sharp. Companies are required to maintain communication records for 7 years. Mr. Harlow was very thorough in his correspondence. Unfortunately for him, he was also very confident he'd never be caught. Derek's mask finally cracked. This is, you can't. Miss Navarro, Judge Chen said, turning to Gabriella. Would you like to make a statement? Gabriella stood and the courtroom went silent. She'd barely spoken through the entire proceeding, letting the evidence speak for itself. Now every eye was on her. 3 years ago, she said quietly, I tried to report fraud. I followed every proper channel. I documented everything, and I was destroyed for it. My education, my career, my reputation, gone, because one powerful man decided his comfort was more important than the truth. Her voice never rose, but it carried. I didn't shelter those bikers to make a political statement. I did it because they were human beings who needed help. And when Derek Harlow realized I was still alive, still fighting, he tried to destroy me again. The same way, with the same methods. Because it had worked before. She turned to look directly at Derek. But this time, I'm not alone. This time, someone believed me. This time, the evidence survived long enough to matter. This time, Bear called from the gallery. She's got family. The bikers rose as one, a wall of solidarity. Judge Chen should have gavelled them down, but she simply watched, something almost like approval in her eyes. Mr. Martinez, Judge Chen said finally, does the state wish to proceed with charges against Miss Navarro? Martinez looked at the evidence, looked at Gabriella, looked at Derek's furious face. No, Your Honor. The state moves to dismiss all charges. Granted. Judge Chen's gavel fell. Miss Navarro, you're free to go. Mr. Harlow. Her gaze turned sharp. I'm issuing a bench warrant for your arrest on charges of evidence tampering, fraud, and conspiracy. Bailiffs. Derek lunged for the exit, but 2 officers were already moving. The courtroom exploded into chaos, reporters shouting, cameras flashing, Derek screaming about his rights as they cuffed him. Gabriella stood frozen, unable to process. It was over. Actually over. Gabriel appeared beside her, not touching, respecting her space. You did it. We did it, she corrected, then paused. Thank you. I owed you that much. She turned to face him fully. You owed me a lot more than that. I know. His voice was quiet. And I'm going to spend however long it takes making it right. It wasn't forgiveness yet. But watching Derek being led away in handcuffs, watching the truth finally win, it felt like the beginning of something. Like maybe, just maybe, she could breathe again. 3 months after the trial, Route 9. Diner reopened. Gabriella stood in the doorway, breathing in the smell of fresh paint and new possibilities. The county had returned the property after extensive cleanup, and Gabriel's lawyers had negotiated a settlement that covered all damages, plus enough to renovate completely. The place looked different now. New booths, updated kitchen equipment, windows that actually sealed against the cold. But she'd kept the old counter, the worn stools, the faded Route 9 sign. Some things deserved to survive. "You ready?" Bear asked, rolling up on his motorcycle with 20 others behind him. They'd come for the grand reopening, along with half the town and more reporters than Gabriella wanted to think about. "As ready as I'll ever be." She stepped outside, squinting in the bright April sunlight. The snow was long gone, replaced by desert heat and endless blue sky. Ruth Lawson arrived in her Mercedes, dressed impeccably as always. She'd become an unexpected ally over the past months, using her society connections to reshape the narrative. Now, instead of criminal waitress, headlines read, "Stanford student vindicated" and "Corruption exposed by unlikely hero." "Gabriella, dear." Ruth embraced her warmly. "I've brought someone who wants to meet you." A young woman stepped forward, nervous but determined. "Miss Navarro, I'm Jennifer Cho. I was a paralegal at Thornton Industries in 2019. Derek Harlow." She swallowed hard. "He destroyed my career too. When I heard about your case, I realized I wasn't alone." "You're not," Gabriella said softly. "None of us are." Over the next hour, 2 more of Derek's victims arrived. A former law student, a junior attorney, each with the same story, speaking truth, facing consequences, losing everything. Gabriel watched from near his car, not approaching. He'd been careful to keep his distance these months, respecting Gabriella's need for space while quietly ensuring she had everything necessary to rebuild. His company had taken a significant hit when the full extent of Derek's fraud became public. Stock prices dropped, partnerships dissolved, regulators circled. He'd let it happen. Some things mattered more than quarterly earnings. "You should talk to her," Ruth said, appearing beside him. "She doesn't want to talk to me." "That's not what I see." Ruth nodded toward where Gabriella stood with Derek's other victims, organizing plans for a support network. "She's building something good from all this pain, and whether you realize it or not, you're part of that story. I'm the villain who saw the light too late. You're the man who chose truth over profit when it mattered." Ruth patted his arm. "Give her time, but don't disappear." The grand reopening became something larger. A celebration, yes, but also a statement. Bear's Motorcycle Club donated their security services free for the first month. Local businesses sent gift baskets. And Ruth Lawson quietly established a fund called Roads of Redemption to help ex-convicts and wrongly accused individuals rebuild their lives. Gabriella gave a short speech, her voice stronger than it had been at the trial. "This diner isn't just about coffee and pie anymore. It's about second chances, about people helping people, even when, especially when, it's hard or scary or inconvenient. We're going to run a community program here, job training for people coming out of the prison system, legal aid clinics, a safe place for anyone who needs one." The crowd applauded. Bear whistled loudly enough to make several people wince. As the sun set and the crowd thinned, Gabriella found Gabriel standing alone by his car. "You're leaving?" she asked. "Didn't want to intrude. This is your day." "It's partially your day, too." She leaned against the car beside him, both of them watching the last light paint the desert gold. "You lost a lot to help me. I lost a corrupt partner and some dirty money. I'll survive." "Gabriel." She waited until he looked at her. "Thank you. Really. I know I've said it before, but you don't owe me gratitude. I should have seen who Derek was years ago." "Maybe." Gabriella was quiet for a moment. "But you saw it when it mattered. You chose the hard right over the easy wrong. That counts for something. Does it count enough for coffee sometime?" The words came out before Gabriel could stop them. "I mean, not a date, just coffee. As people who survived something terrible and maybe want to figure out who they are on the other side of it." Gabriella studied his face, the exhaustion he tried to hide, the genuine regret he wore like a weight. 3 months ago, she'd hated him. Hated his privilege, his blindness, his willingness to believe the worst of her without question. But he'd changed, or maybe revealed who he actually was beneath the businessman facade. "Coffee," she agreed. "Tomorrow. Here. You're buying." His smile was small but genuine. "Deal." As Gabriel drove away, Ruth appeared beside Gabriella. "You're good for him, you know. He's been sleepwalking through life, mistaking success for meaning. You woke him up." "I didn't do anything except survive." "That's not nothing, dear." Ruth looked at the renovated diner, at the motorcycles still parked outside, at the future that was slowly taking shape from the wreckage. "You're teaching him what actually matters. That's worth more than all his quarterly reports combined." Inside the diner, Bear was organizing the bikers for a group photo. Someone had brought a guitar. Laughter echoed through the space that had once held only cold and fear. Gabriella smiled. The past 3 years had been hell. The last 3 months had been a war. But standing here now, watching people gather in a place that stood for something more than survival, this felt like winning. Not just against Derek, not just in court, but winning back her life, her voice, her right to exist without fear. And tomorrow, over coffee, maybe she'd start figuring out what came next. The coffee meetings became a routine. Every Tuesday and Thursday, Gabriel arrived at Route 9 Diner at 7 a.m. before the morning rush. Gabriella would pour 2 cups, and they'd sit at the corner booth talking about everything except the trial. Books, childhood, the strange way desert sunrises could make even gas stations look beautiful. It was easy, comfortable, and that terrified Gabriella more than she wanted to admit. 6 weeks after the diner reopened, Gabriel arrived looking like he hadn't slept. His tie was crooked, a detail so unlike him that Gabriella noticed immediately. "Bad night?" she asked, pouring his usual black coffee. "I need to tell you something." Gabriel's voice was rough. "Something I should have told you months ago." Gabriella set down the pot carefully. "Okay. When Derek first approached me about partnering, it was 2023. He came with the Thornton deal already structured. Said he'd identified an acquisition opportunity that would triple our revenue within 2 years. Gabriel stared into his coffee. "I didn't ask enough questions. I saw the numbers, saw the potential, and I didn't ask where the opportunity came from or why it was so perfect." "Gabriel, I knew something was off," he continued, words spilling out like confession. "The paperwork was too clean. The opposition folded too easily. But I told myself it was just good business, that Derek was brilliant at finding angles." He finally looked up and his eyes were full of something raw. "I knew, Gabriella. Maybe not the details, but I knew something wasn't right. And I took the money anyway." The diner was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. Gabriella felt something crack open in her chest. Not anger, but a deep, weary sadness. "You were complicit," she said quietly. "Yes. You built your expansion on fraud." "Yes. And you're telling me this now because you deserve to know who I actually am." Gabriel's voice shook slightly. "Not the man who fixed things after they broke. The man who let them break in the first place, because it was profitable." Gabriella stood abruptly, walking to the window. Outside, the morning sun was turning the highway golden. She'd rebuilt her entire life on the belief that truth mattered, that integrity wasn't negotiable. And now this man she'd been having coffee with, this man she'd started to trust. "I need you to leave," she said. "Gabriella, please." She didn't turn around. "Just go." She heard his footsteps, the door opening and closing. Then silence. Bear found her 2 hours later, still standing at the window. "Heard Lawson left looking like someone kicked his dog," Bear said, pouring himself coffee without asking. "Want to talk about it?" "He knew." Gabriella's voice was hollow. "Maybe not everything, but enough. He knew Derek was dirty and he took the money anyway. And now he told you. Like that makes it better." Bear was quiet for a moment, his massive hands wrapped around the small coffee cup. "You know what I did before I started writing?" Gabriella shook her head. "Accountant. Boring as hell, but paid well. Had a boss who was skimming from client accounts. Not much, 1,000 here, 500 there. Small enough that most people wouldn't notice." He took a sip. "I noticed. And I said nothing for 2 years because I needed the job." "That's different, is it?" Bear met her eyes. "I knew what was right. I chose what was easy. Until one day an old woman came in crying because her retirement account was empty. Then I couldn't pretend anymore." "What did you do?" "Turned in my boss. Lost my career. Ended up riding with the club because no accounting firm would touch me after I became a whistleblower." He smiled without humor. "Point is, we all got choices. Every day. And sometimes we make the wrong ones. What matters is what we do when we finally see clear." He should have seen clear sooner. Probably. Bear stood, massive and gentle. But he sees now. And he's doing something about it. That's more than most people manage. After he left, Gabriella sat alone with her thoughts. She thought about Gabriel selling his stake in the company, about the settlement money he'd fought to get her, about Ruth's foundation, funded largely by Gabriel's personal accounts, about a man who could have walked away clean but chose to burn his empire down instead, about the difference between someone who never did wrong and someone who did wrong, faced it, and tried to make it right. 3 days later, Gabriella drove to Gabriel's office. The receptionist looked startled. Miss Navarro, he's in a meeting, but I'll wait. She sat in the sleek lobby, surrounded by expensive art and floor-to-ceiling windows. This was Gabriel's world. Power and money and influence. A world that had tried to destroy her, but also a world that had ultimately chosen truth when it mattered. Gabriel emerged 20 minutes later, stopped dead when he saw her. Gabriella, can we talk? They ended up in his office. The door closed against curious eyes. Gabriel stood by the window, hands in pockets, waiting. I've been angry at you, Gabriella said, for not seeing who Derek was, for believing him over me, for building success on dirty money. You have every right. Let me finish. She took a breath. But I've also been angry at myself, for running instead of fighting, for hiding in that diner instead of trying again to clear my name, for 3 years of telling myself I was being smart when really I was just scared. Gabriel turned to face her. You made mistakes, Gabriella continued. Big ones. You chose money over morality, and people got hurt. But when you saw what you'd done, you didn't make excuses. You didn't minimize it. You burned everything down to make it right. She met his eyes. That took courage. It took you almost dying in a cell for me to find that courage. Better late than never. She smiled slightly. Bear told me about his accounting job, about how sometimes we don't see what we don't want to see until we can't look away anymore. I think, she paused, I think maybe forgiveness isn't about pretending the harm didn't happen. It's about acknowledging it did and choosing to move forward anyway. Are you saying, I'm saying I forgive you? The words felt lighter than she expected. Not because you deserve it, not because it erases what happened, but because holding on to anger was making me into someone I don't want to be. Gabriel's expression cracked. I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep doing the work. Keep choosing right even when it's expensive. Keep being the person you showed me you could be. I will. His voice was rough. I promise. Gabriella stepped forward and held out her hand. Gabriel stared at it for a moment, then took it. His palm was warm, solid, real. Thank you, he whispered. Don't thank me yet. She squeezed his hand once before letting go. You're volunteering at the diner's legal aid clinic, every Saturday. No excuses. Despite everything, Gabriel laughed. Yes, ma'am. As Gabriella left his office, she felt something shift inside her. Not happiness exactly, but peace. The kind that came from putting down weight you'd been carrying too long. Outside, the sun was setting over Reno. Somewhere, Derek Harlow sat in a cell awaiting trial. Somewhere, Ruth was planning the next Roads of Redemption event. Somewhere, Bear and his brothers were riding free. And here, Gabriella was choosing to forgive. Not for Gabriel, for herself. Because she'd survived too much to let bitterness steal what she'd fought to reclaim. 8 months after the trial, Route 9 Diner won the Nevada Community Service Award. Gabriella stood on the stage at the Reno Convention Center, holding a crystal plaque that caught the light like captured stars. 500 people applauded, community leaders, former inmates, motorcycle club members in their best clothes, and reporters who'd once called her a criminal. I don't have a fancy speech prepared, she said into the microphone, her voice steady. 8 months ago, I was in a jail cell. A year ago, I was hiding from my past. 2 years ago, I'd given up on ever practicing law again. She looked out at the audience. Bear sat in the front row, wearing an actual suit. Ruth Lawson beamed with pride. And Gabriel stood in the back, deliberately out of spotlight, but present. This award isn't just mine. It belongs to every person who chose kindness when it was easier to judge. To Bear Thompson and the motorcycle clubs who showed me what loyalty means. To Ruth Lawson, who saw potential where others saw only a scandal. And to everyone who works at the diner's programs. You're changing lives every single day. The applause was thunderous. After the ceremony, the real celebration moved back to the diner. The parking lot filled with motorcycles and expensive cars parked side by side. Inside, tables overflowed with food from every restaurant in town, their contribution to the woman who'd somehow become a symbol of second chances. Speech was good, Bear said, appearing with a plate piled dangerously high. Short. I like short. You would. Gabriella laughed. How's the reintegration program going? Got 15 guys through job training last month, 12 already placed in positions. His smile was proud. Turns out people just needed someone to believe in them. Ruth joined them, elegant in pearls and navy silk. Gabriella, dear, I wanted you to know. The Roads of Redemption Foundation has been approved for federal grant matching. We'll be able to expand to 3 more states next year. That's incredible. It's necessary. Ruth's expression was serious. There are too many Gabriellas out there. Too many people destroyed by systems that value power over truth. We're going to help as many as we can. As the evening wore on, Gabriella found herself watching Gabriel. He'd been manning the coffee station for the last hour, serving drinks and chatting with people like he belonged there. He'd sold his remaining stake in Lawson Enterprises 3 months ago, using the money to fund scholarships for law students from disadvantaged backgrounds. The business journals had called it career suicide. Gabriel called it getting his priorities straight. He caught her watching and smiled. Tentative, hopeful, real. She walked over. Taking my job. Someone had to pick up your slack. He poured her a cup, their fingers brushing briefly during the exchange. Big night for you. Big night for all of us. Gabriella looked around the diner, at the legal aid clinic sign on the back wall, at the job board filled with opportunities, at the community they'd built from wreckage. None of this happens without you. None of this happens without you having the courage to keep fighting. Gabriel set down the pot. I just finally chose the right side. You chose the hard side. There's a difference. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the celebration. Someone had brought a guitar, and music floated through the warm night air. Outside, motorcycles gleamed under string lights that transformed the parking lot into something magical. I've been thinking, Gabriel said carefully, about what comes next. For me, I mean. And I'm enrolling in law school, part-time program at Nevada. He laughed at her expression. I know. I'm 42. But I figure if I'm going to keep working with Roads of Redemption, I should actually understand the legal system instead of just throwing money at it. Gabriella felt warmth bloom in her chest. That's really good, Gabrielle. I had a good teacher. He met her eyes. Someone who showed me that principles matter more than profits. That doing the right thing is worth any cost. That second chances aren't just for other people. They're for everyone brave enough to change. I didn't teach you that. You chose it. I chose it because you showed me it was possible. Gabriel hesitated. Gabriella, I know we've been careful. Taking things slow, building friendship first, and I'm grateful for that. But I need you to know, Gabriel. She touched his arm gently. I know. You do? I see how you look at me, how you show up every week, how you volunteer without being asked, how you've rebuilt your entire life around different values. She smiled. I'm not blind, and I'm not immune. His breath caught. Meaning? Meaning maybe we could try. Actually try. Not just coffee and friendship, but... She paused, searching for words. But seeing where this goes when we're both finally free of the past. I'd like that, Gabriel said quietly. I'd like that very much. They didn't kiss. Not there. Not with everyone watching. But their hands found each other, fingers intertwining, and it felt like a promise. Like the beginning of something real. Bear's voice boomed across the diner. Stop making eyes at each other and get over here. We're toasting. Everyone gathered, raising glasses of everything from beer to apple juice. Bear stood on a chair, an alarming sight given his size, and cleared his throat. To Gabriella Navarro, he announced, who saved 20 freezing bikers and ended up saving a whole lot more than that. To second chances, to speaking truth, and to the fact that sometimes the right thing is also the hardest thing. We're all better for knowing you. Hear, hear! The crowd cheered. Gabriella felt tears prick her eyes. A year ago, she'd been alone, hiding, convinced her life was over. Now she stood surrounded by family she'd chosen and been chosen by. Bikers and billionaires, ex-convicts and society ladies. All of them connected by the simple belief that people deserved chances to be better. That truth was worth fighting for. That kindness could change the world. As the party continued into the night, Gabriella stepped outside for air. The desert stretched endlessly under star-filled sky, beautiful and vast and full of possibility. Gabriel joined her, not speaking, just standing close. Thank you, she said finally. For what? For seeing me, for believing me, for choosing the truth even when it cost you everything. Gabriel took her hand again. Best investment I ever made. She laughed, and the sound carried across the parking lot, mixing with music and motorcycle engines and the noise of people who'd found each other in the wreckage. Tomorrow there would be more work, more people to help, more fights to win. But tonight they celebrated. Tonight they were home. The Roads of Redemption Gala was Ruth's idea, but it became everyone's project. The Reno Grand Hotel Ballroom, the same venue where Derek had held his disastrous press conference a year ago, was transformed. String lights hung from the ceiling like captured stars. Motorcycle club patches were framed as art on the walls, and the guest list mixed Silicon Valley entrepreneurs with ex-convicts, state senators with bikers, creating the kind of gathering that would have been impossible before Gabriela Navarro made national news. Gabriela stood at the edge of the ballroom, watching Ruth work the crowd with practiced grace. The foundation had raised over $2 million tonight. That money would fund legal clinics, job training programs, and scholarships across 7 states. "You clean up nice," Bear said, appearing in an actual tuxedo that must have required custom tailoring. His beard was trimmed, his hair pulled back, but the skull tattoos on his neck remained proudly visible. "So do you." Gabriela smoothed her emerald dress, another Ruth Lawson contribution that probably cost more than a month's diner receipts. "Nervous about your speech?" "Terrified." Bear grinned. "But I've faced down riot cops. I can handle rich people with checkbooks." When Bear took the stage, the room quieted. His presence commanded attention even without the motorcycle vest. "Most of you know my story," he began, his voice carrying without microphone. 20 years in the Hells Angels. Arrests, fights, a reputation that made mothers pull their kids inside when we rode past. He paused. "But a year ago, my brothers and I were freezing to death on Highway 50, and a woman we'd never met, a woman who had every reason to be afraid of us, chose kindness over fear. She saved our lives." The crowd was rapt. That night changed everything, not just for us, but for this whole community. Because Gabriela Navarro showed us something we'd forgotten, that second chances aren't just for some people. They're for everyone willing to do the work. Applause rippled through the ballroom. So tonight we celebrate not just a foundation, but a principle, that people can change, that past mistakes don't define future possibilities, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is trust someone everyone else has written off. As Bear concluded and stepped down, Gabriel rose from his table. He hadn't planned to speak. This was supposed to be Gabriela's night. But something Bear said unlocked words he'd been carrying for months. He walked to the stage before he could change his mind. "I'm Gabriel Lawson," he said, and the room recognized him immediately. Former business titan, reformed partnership with a criminal, the man who'd chosen truth over empire. "And I need to say something." He found Gabriela in the crowd. She looked surprised, curious, beautiful. "A year ago I stood in front of cameras and condemned an innocent woman. I let prejudice and privilege blind me to truth. I became complicit in a system that destroyed lives for profit." His voice was steady but raw. "Gabriela Navarro had every right to hate me, to refuse my help, to let me drown in the consequences of my choices." The ballroom was silent now. Instead, she taught me what courage actually means. Not the easy courage of wealth and power, but the hard courage of integrity, of choosing right even when it costs everything, of forgiving people who don't deserve it because holding anger hurts you more than them. Gabriel descended from the stage, walking toward where Gabriela stood frozen. "She taught me that serving others isn't charity, it's privilege, that second chances apply to everyone, including men who built empires on dirty money and convenient blindness. That love," his voice caught, "that love means showing up, every day, doing the work, being worthy of trust you haven't earned yet." He stopped in front of her, aware of 500 pairs of eyes watching but only seeing hers. "Gabriela Navarro, you made me want to be better. You showed me what actually matters. And I know I don't deserve you, but—" He smiled slightly. "But I'm hoping you'll give me the chance to keep trying anyway." The room held its breath. Gabriela stared at him, her eyes bright with emotion. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, Bear's voice boomed. "For God's sake, woman, kiss him already." Laughter broke the tension. Gabriela laughed too, tears streaming down her face. "You're really doing this?" she asked. Grand romantic gesture in front of everyone. "I spent a year hiding the truth. Seemed like it was time to be public about something good." Gabriel held out his hand. "So what do you say? Coffee Tuesday and Thursday, dinner when you're free, and a lifetime of me trying to deserve you? That's not much of a proposal. It's a beginning." Gabriela took his hand, then pulled him close. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to coffee and dinner and new beginnings. Yes to you finally figuring out what matters. Yes to all of it." When their lips met, the ballroom erupted. Applause, Cheers, wolf whistles from the bikers, and Ruth Lawson crying openly while trying to maintain her dignity. Gabriel cupped Gabriella's face, kissing her like she was air, and he'd been drowning. She kissed him back with equal intensity. A year of tension and trust and slow-burning attraction finally ignited. When they broke apart, both breathless, Gabriella smiled against his mouth. "You know the photographers got that, right? We'll be on every news site by morning." "Good," Gabrielle said. "Let them see. Let everyone see that sometimes the story has a happy ending, that people can change, that love is possible even after, especially after surviving hell." "Pretty words, Lawson. I'm working on my romantic speeches. How am I doing?" "Needs practice." She kissed him again, softer this time. "But I suppose I can help with that." The party continued around them, music and laughter, and the sound of people celebrating possibility. But in that moment, Gabriel and Gabriella existed in their own world. A world built on truth and second chances and the brave choice to trust again. Bear raised his glass from across the room. Ruth beamed with satisfaction. And somewhere in a federal prison, Derek Harlow learned that the woman he'd tried to destroy twice had just become the symbol of everything good he'd never be. Justice, it turned out, sometimes looked like love. And love, when it was real, looked like two people who'd survived the worst and chosen each other anyway. 1 year later, the morning sun painted Highway 50 in shades of gold and promise. Gabriella stood on the newly renovated Route 9 diner porch, watching motorcycles arrive in formation, not 20 this time, but 200. The annual Roads of Redemption rally had become a national event. "Coffee's ready," Gabriel called from inside, his voice carrying the comfortable ease of someone who belonged there. She smiled. He'd kept his promise about law school, graduating 3 months ago at the top of his part-time program. Now he split his time between the diner's legal clinic and representing wrongly convicted individuals pro bono. His fancy suits had been replaced by jeans and button-downs. His Mercedes traded for a sensible truck that could haul supplies. He'd never been more attractive. Bear rolled up with his usual thunder, now leading a convoy that included ex-gang members, former inmates, and people who'd simply needed someone to believe in them. The Roads of Redemption project had expanded beyond anyone's dreams. Job training in 12 states, legal aid clinics in 30 cities, and a recidivism rate among their participants that was making criminologists rethink everything. "Big day," Bear said, dismounting with practiced ease. At 52, he moved like a much younger man. Sobriety and purpose had given him a second life. "Ready for your interview?" "As ready as I'll ever be." Gabriella had been asked to testify before Congress about criminal justice reform. Her story, from Stanford to jail cell to national advocate, had become a rallying cry for change. Nervous, though. "You're going to be brilliant," Gabriel said, emerging with coffee for everyone. "Just tell them what you told the Nevada legislature." "The truth is pretty compelling." Ruth's Mercedes pulled up. She refused to ride a motorcycle despite multiple invitations, and she emerged in tailored elegance that somehow worked perfectly alongside leather and denim. "Darling," she embraced Gabriella warmly, "I brought the latest numbers. The foundation has now helped over 15,000 people find employment. 15,000. And the recidivism rate is the lowest in the country for any comparable program." Gabriella finished, grinning. "I know, you tell me every week. Because I'm proud." Ruth's eyes misted. "We're changing the system, one person at a time." The rally began with testimonials. Former inmates shared stories of transformation. Employers talked about discovering talented workers they'd never have considered before. Families reunited after years of incarceration-imposed separation. Jennifer Cho, Derek's former victim who'd become a close friend, now ran the legal advocacy branch. She took the microphone with confidence that had been earned through hard work and therapy. 3 years ago, I thought my life was over," Jennifer said. "Derek Harlow destroyed my reputation, and I believed him. Believed I deserved it. Then I met Gabriella, and she showed me something crucial. That one person's lies don't define your truth. That you can rebuild, that you're worth fighting for." The crowd applauded, and Jennifer's smile was radiant. As the afternoon sun climbed higher, Gabrielle found Gabriella in the diner's back office, reviewing her congressional testimony. "You should take a break," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Can't. I present to the Senate Judiciary Committee in 3 days. Then you definitely need a break." He kissed her neck. "Come on, humor me." They walked out to the highway where 2 motorcycles waited, Gabriel had finally learned to ride, under Bear's terrifying tutelage. The leather jacket looked strange on him at first, but now it fit. "Where are we going?" Gabriella asked. "Just ride with me." He handed her a helmet. "Trust me?" "Always." They rode east into the desert, following roads that stretched endlessly under blue sky. Eventually, Gabriel pulled off at a scenic overlook, the same spot where Gabriella had once sat alone 3 years ago, wondering if life was worth continuing. Now she stood there with a man she loved, surrounded by purpose and possibility. "I brought you here for a reason," Gabriel said, nervous in a way that made her heart skip. "Gabriel, let me say this before I lose my nerve." He took her hands. 3 years ago, I was sleepwalking through life, rich, successful, and completely empty. Then a snowstorm brought me to a diner where a woman was choosing kindness over fear, where she was risking everything to save people everyone else had written off. His voice shook slightly. "You woke me up, Gabriella. You showed me what courage looks like, what integrity costs, what love means when it's real and earned and built on truth." He knelt, pulling a simple silver ring from his pocket. "I know we haven't been together long by conventional standards, but we've lived lifetimes in these months. We've fought battles and won wars and built something beautiful from wreckage." He smiled through tears. "Gabriela Navarro, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you? Will you—" "Yes," she interrupted, laughing and crying. "Yes, you idiot. Get up." Gabriel stood, slipping the ring on her finger, and kissed her like the world was ending and beginning simultaneously. When they broke apart, both breathless, Gabriella noticed the inscription inside the band. "Truth, always." "Our motto," Gabriel explained. "Our promise," she corrected. They stood at the overlook, arms around each other, watching the sun paint the desert in impossible colors. Behind them, the Route 9 diner waited, symbol of second chances and new beginnings. Ahead, the road stretched endlessly, full of possibility. "Ready?" Gabriel asked, nodding toward the motorcycles. "For what?" "Everything." He kissed her forehead. "Congress testimony, wedding planning, growing the foundation, whatever comes next." Gabriella looked at the ring on her finger, at the man beside her, at the future they'd built from nothing. "Yeah," she said, smiling. "I'm ready." They rode back to the diner as the sun set, 2 motorcycles moving in perfect synchronization. Behind them, the desert stretched endless and beautiful. Ahead, the lights of Route 9 diner glowed warm and welcoming. Inside, Bear was organizing an impromptu celebration. He'd somehow known the proposal was coming. Ruth was already crying happy tears. Jennifer and the others were cheering. This was family. Not blood, but choice. People who'd survived hell and decided to build heaven together. Gabriella and Gabriel walked into the noise and light and love, hands clasped tight. The past had tried to destroy them both. The present had required more courage than either thought they possessed. But the future was theirs, built on truth, forged in fire, held together by the simple revolutionary belief that people deserved second chances. All people, even especially themselves. The motorcycles outside gleamed under string lights. Inside, laughter echoed. And somewhere on Highway 50, another traveler in trouble would eventually find Route 9 diner, would find shelter, would find hope, would find that redemption was always possible. For everyone brave enough to take the road less traveled. If this story touched your heart, share it. Subscribe for more tales of courage, redemption, and love that conquers all. Because everyone deserves a second chance, and some stories deserve to be told.